brings people together.
Delayed.
Monopoly's been bringing people together for almost 50 years. That's how long we've been wheeling and dealing together, building hotels together, and going to jail together.
Corner the market in utilities. You can't lose.
Share a smile and your day seems a whole lot better.
Parker Brothers kind of fun brings people together.
Monopoly. We all know what it is, and if you don't, you're lying. Hasbro really knocked this game out of the park. If they wanted to make a bad game, it is physically impossible to play this game with anyone under the age of 10. It's a family game, but it's utterly impossible to play with your actual family, unless you're all a bunch of old people, and then the game's just gonna make you despise each other. Still, it did somehow end up becoming the most commercially successful board game ever made. Somehow. The game is simple. Buy things so other people can't, and make your competition go into debt and die. It's basically capitalism, the game, which was entirely the point. There's an old saying that my great-great-great-great-great-granddaddy used to tell me, and that is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But what the Hasbro's great-granddaddy told them is that, if it ain't broke, just release over 3,000 variations of your game for instant profit. Despite Monopoly being such a knockout game, they made the horrible mistake to just shill the rights out to anyone who could even think about making their own version. Anything from completely changing how you play the game, to just replacing the Monopoly Man with literally anyone else. That's why in this video, I'm going to show you just how bonkers the world of Monopoly games is. Let's hop into it. Monopoly is a complicated game, and if you're watching this, I can only hope that you know how it works at least a little bit beforehand. So, I'll explain Monopoly in about 60 seconds or so for you. Players take turns in order, with the initial player determined by chance before the game, with each player rolling the dice and the player who rolled the highest number going first.
A typical turn begins with the rolling of the dice and advancing clockwise around the board the corresponding number of squares. Landing on chance or community chest, a player draws the top card from the respective pile. If the player lands on an unowned property, whether street, railroad, or utility, they can buy the property for its listed purchase price, with the banker making change if necessary. If the property landed on is already owned or unmortgaged, they must pay the owner the given rent. The price depending on whether the property is part of the monopoly or a double development. If the player rolls doubles, he rolls again after completing his turn. Three sets of doubles in a row, however, lands the player in jail. During the turn, players may also choose to develop or mortgage properties. The development involves the construction, so given amounts of money to pay the bank, of houses or hotels. All developments must be sold before property can be rent. The penalty is right to buy each one's property, which must be paid interest on rent. You may only take 1.5 points for the
Parker Brothers' official instructions encourage the use of house rules, specific additions to or subtractions from the official rule sets used in the household. Many casual Monopoly players are surprised to discover that some of the rules that they are used to using are not part of the official rules, like the free parking jackpot, getting $2,000 at the start of the game, or not allowing a player in jail to do anything at all. Even if the house rules are unofficial, they still get used in some things like video game versions of Monopoly. I think it's neat how people can customize their Monopoly experience and tailor it to what they really like in a game, like that Uno that came out a while back. Now then, there are two categories of Monopoly variations. The ones that change the gameplay, aka the ones that actually matter, and the ones that just change the aesthetics. I'll start with the first one. These are the Monopolies that actually matter if you're looking for more than just a reskin. There are far too many Monopolies to explain each version in full, so I'll be brief and only pick a handful. Starting off simple with Anti-Monopoly. Anti-Monopoly is similar to Monopoly, obviously, but with one major division. At the start, all players are evenly divided into competitors and monopolists, with competitors having less risk overall, and monopolists having a higher risk, higher reward. So what side you choose completely changes your strategy, which is interesting. Monopoly Junior Edition. This version is an easier, simplified version of Monopoly, aimed at younger players. It has a smaller rectangular board, and instead of being based on street names, it's based on an amusement park to make it more child-friendly, which I think is silly. Monopoly Speed Edition is absolutely bonkers. This version can be finished in 10 minutes, which is a lie, but hey, who doesn't lie when they're trying to sell something, huh? By the way, commission me. I'll have it done in under 3 days. You only have a handful of seconds to do anything important, which makes mistakes easy to make. There's no time to get your bearings either, because this game flies by at a breakneck pace. It is insane. Monopoly Speed Edition changes a man. Have you ever wanted to play an even more obnoxious and intense version of Monopoly? Well, the Family Game Night Championship Edition is just for you. And what a mouthful that name is. Even if it was just to advertise the World Championships in 2009, which I had no idea actually happened, it's pretty cool. It comes with everything someone might need to host their own championship of Monopoly, like a score pad, mover bag, and even a trophy. Unfortunately, you can only play it once before you have to give away the trophy, and then there's really no point to playing it anymore. Then there's Cheaters Edition, where you can finally justify the stupid cheating that you do normally. What, you don't cheat? Don't lie. I know you've cheated before. Nobody has the patience to play this game without taking a couple $100 bills from the bank when the banker's taking a piss. Unless you're a nerd or something. These versions of the game are few and far between, but are some of the only variations of Monopoly that are worth it if you're strictly looking for a fresh take on the Monopoly experience. There are a lot of other versions of Monopoly that only slightly change the gameplay, but getting into all the different versions would both stretch this video to infinity and make it confusing to make and watch. So I'll just leave it at this. Alright, now for the lame ones. These versions of Monopoly are painfully easy to make. They take the words on the cards and board, slap random stuff from the franchise on them, and boom, you've got yourself a special Monopoly. The fact that it's so easy to crap one of these out is probably why there's so many of them. Let's start with something simple. Literally anything someone can watch. Anything from Big Bang Theory to Star Wars, Animaniacs, The Simpsons, The Three Stooges, Walking Dead, Rick and Morty, Transformers, Breaking Bad. Even bands can get turned into a version of Monopoly. Nothing is sacred, and no person, place, or thing is safe from Hasbro's wrath. Sure, if I was a diehard fan of, like, Sailor Moon, I might want the Monopoly version. But come on. You can't tell me that you'd think about showing that to anyone proudly. All I'm saying is, it doesn't matter how big a fan I am of One Piece. I'm not buying the Monopoly version. Wait, they have a token for each Straw Hat? That's kind of cool, actually. I'm not going to go into this one too deeply, but sport variations of Monopoly? I don't understand why sports board games exist. Doesn't that defeat the whole purpose of the sport? I doubt anyone that's a diehard fan of sports would either want to own a Dallas Cowboys Monopoly, or know how to play Monopoly at all, honestly. Video games. This section speaks for itself. Any kind of video game under the sun can get the Monopoly treatment. Angry Birds, Mario, Overwatch, Zelda, Warhammer 40k, Call of Duty, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, GTA. It seems everyone wants a piece of the Monopoly pie for a quick buck. It's really silly thinking about how some of these happened. There's a lot of these I wish didn't exist, and yet here we are. Again, nothing is sacred. Anniversary and collector's editions. These are all about the same. Every decade or so, another one of these pops out of Hasbro to celebrate Monopoly aging. They don't have all that much special to them, so there isn't much point talking about them. But I will anyways. There's a Monopoly for the 25th, 30th, 40th, 50th, 60th, 65th, 70th, 80th, and 85th anniversaries so far. Then there's the first edition, which is a republishing of the very first Monopoly, which I'll admit is kind of cool. It's interesting history. They've also made versions for other anniversaries, like the Coca-Cola 125th anniversary. Geez, they've been around for a long time. The 007 and Doctor Who 50th anniversaries, and the Ford 100th anniversary. Some of these variations actually look decent, rather than just having cartoon characters plastered all over the board, and they actually look like they respect what the anniversary edition is about. Although, it's still Monopoly, so it can only be taken so seriously. And finally, there's the collector's editions. They're exactly what they sound like. Stuff for nerds! Although most of the reskin Monopolies are pretty much for collectors only as well. I can't really think of a reason to buy GTA Monopoly unless it was to brag to your friends about. And even then, the only thing that'll happen if you show your copy of GTA Monopoly to anyone is bullying. Specifically, bullying you. There aren't very many collector's or anniversary editions of Monopoly, at least in comparison to the other thousands of versions. If there were an abundance of collector's editions, the point of a collector's edition would be lost entirely, which is probably obvious. And important anniversaries don't really happen all that often, so those aren't too frequent. Unless someone would be willing to buy a copy of Monopoly for every single year that has passed since Monopoly was created. Oh, but that sounds silly. Don't get any ideas, Hasbro. This section is by far the most ridiculous to me. Dates and locations. For some reason, from 1994 to 2007, Hasbro decided to hand out the rights to just random cities to see if they would make their own Monopoly game, and most of them did, which is just foul to me. They even have a version for my hometown, which happens to be a hole in the ground in the middle of nowhere, and I wouldn't touch our version of Monopoly with a 10-foot pole. There's also versions for different time frames, for some reason, like the 80s and 70s, as well as versions for every state, a bunch of countries, and some other concepts. I'll just stick to the standard edition for now, thank you very much. Okay, what Monopoly version is next? Actually, let me check the list. How many are there left? Dear Lord. Okay, there are far too many Monopoly versions to discuss, so I'm dubbing this the lightning round. Get ready to hear about way too many Monopolies. Get ready for some fast talking. Ever wanted to play Monopoly on the go? Of course not, you're not insane. Well, if you wanted to, you can use the Go Pause and Play edition, where everything is clipped onto the tiny board and everything is saved and recorded for the next short session. What fun! Monopoly Revolution, also known as the 75th Anniversary Edition. This one has a circular board. Wow! Bibleopoly, where instead of monopolizing the board, your goal is to build a church. I'm not kidding. The Electronic Banking Edition is a surprisingly convenient version of Monopoly that I would consider getting, honestly. Irishopoly is called Irishopoly. I mean, come on. Mrs. Monopoly, where women get paid more than men. Why? Monopoly Cereal. Eat it, why don't you? Giant Edition, where everything is 50% bigger. Monopoly for sore losers, aka Monopoly for my little brother. Monopoly Mega, which is Super Mega Monopoly. Millionaire Monopoly, where whoever wins gets $1 million actual dollars. Monopoly Live, not to be confused with the game show of the same name. Why does this exist? Monopoly.com, not to be confused with the website. Tropical Tycoon, which is a DVD game for some reason. What? Don't like any of the 3,000 Monopolies already made? Make your own Monopoly then, smartass. Cat Lovers Monopoly, BuzzFeed Monopoly, Dragon Ball Monopoly, Olympics Monopoly, Arcade Monopoly, Dino-opoly, Civil War Monopoly, My National Parks Monopoly, Disney Villains Monopoly, Littlest Pet Shop Monopoly, Monopoly for Millennials, Triple X-opoly, Firefighters Monopoly, Candy Crush Monopoly. There are just too many of these things to keep track of. Who thought it would be a good idea to make this many? Hasbro's just being wacky with this stuff. God has forsaken us. And then you have Ghetto-opoly, which is such a horrible, offensive dumpster fire, it's no longer allowed to be sold legally in any store in the US, physical or online. It's probably the worst version of Monopoly ever made, but it's fascinating that it even happened in the first place. And just the fact that it stands out among the sea of cookie-cutter monopolies gives it a leg up on the rest, despite being such an abomination. Now for the versions that actually matter to me. These are some of the Monopolies I've seen that I can actually understand purchasing, whether it's a fancy design, a neat concept, or it's just stupid enough to be interesting. Monopoly 3D New York Edition is a special oversized version of Monopoly that has a really cool board, and a whole lot of pizzazz thanks to art by Charles Fazino? Facino? I can't pronounce names, and winning solutions. Unfortunately, there are only 2,000 copies of this version made, so I doubt I'll ever get my hands on it. Bookshelf Monopoly. This is a simple concept that I like a lot, and they've been around for a while. It's just a game of Monopoly that can be stored on a bookshelf, which is funny to think about. Imagine you go to your son's bedroom holding a book, and he thinks you're gonna read him a bedtime story, but nope! You start a game of Monopoly with him and it takes all night because this game takes an eternity to finish. Monopoly Chocolate Edition. This version is hilarious to me. All of the properties are made of chocolate and they're all perfectly edible. What I want to know is what monster would eat these on their first run through and then be unable to play because they ate the properties. What is wrong with you? This one's a bit of a double feature, the Franklin Mint Deluxe Monopoly and Luxury Monopoly. These two are just really nice looking versions of the game, so fancy and clean looking, at least compared to the bland standard board. Don't get me wrong, the original board's a classic, but why would you choose that one over these ones? Also, the tokens are made of real gold. Why? Luxury Edition is about the same, but to a slightly lesser degree. Monopoly Golden Token Bonus. This one's really fascinating. Apparently people really hated the iron token, so they made a new one with 8 new tokens that could potentially replace it in the next version. I'll miss the iron token. Gone but not forgotten. And then there's Artopoly, which has a stupid name, but I swear it's more interesting than the name makes it sound. It's a huge, one-of-a-kind custom Monopoly board that doubles as a performance art piece made by Brendan Jameson in 2005, where instead of tokens, you'd use bronze art instruments, and Pass and Go gave you 200 actual pounds. Oh, this was in the UK, by the way. It wasn't an exact copy of Monopoly either. The gameplay was edited here and there, too. I really, really like this version. It's so creative, and it seems like it would be a ton of fun to play. If only I had a passport. And the final Monopoly board I'm going to talk about this video is Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends Monopoly... Where's the Thomas Monopoly? You're telling me they've made a version of Monopoly for every city, state, country, video game, film, and time frame? And there's no Thomas Monopoly? Forget what I said about not getting any ideas earlier, Hasbro. Steal this idea. I want my Thomas and Friends Monopoly now. I mean right. There are a lot of Monopoly versions. Too many for sure. Are any of them actually worth buying? Well, that depends. If you enjoy the novelty of seeing the evolution of the game and collecting everything for collector's sake, then of course, follow your passion. Collecting stuff is awesome. I mean, I started collections of this stuff for God's sake. I don't mind new stuff at all. Innovation's a great thing, especially if it enhances the original product. However, when you've made well over 1,000 versions of your game with little to no differences, that's when I think you might be overdoing it a little bit, but that might just be me. The only reason you should even ever slightly consider buying a second Monopoly is to get the different tokens that come with each edition. That's the only reason I will tolerate someone having any sort of collection of these games. Then you can make your own little roster of Monopoly pieces. The greatest crossover in history of sorts. The only version of Monopoly you need to buy is the standard version. It's classic, it's fun, it's tense, it's everything a good game should be. And it accomplishes that while everyone's just sitting in their chairs trying to read the tiny text of cardstock cards. Hardly anyone I've met actually wants to play on the fancy schmancy Monopoly editions, just using their own house rules no matter what. And I feel like this only proves how timeless the original Monopoly is. I can't think of any version of this game that I would play over the original, despite how this game just tears people apart. I have to love it, for bringing my family together for fun every time we play. And I think that's the case for a lot of families all over the world. I doubt Monopoly is going to get any less popular, and I'm fine with it staying that way.
How did I make it big? I know how. To play the game, I buy real estate, hotels, fancy cars, even railroads. And I take chances. To make it big, you've got to play the game. I'm Monopoly Game.
But I just have one thing to ask. If Monopoly's so good, why isn't there a Monopoly 2? Huh? Checkmate, Hasbro. Looks like I finally bested you, oh.